How are you doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world, Options Trading Academy. And what we're going to talk about today is how Roe v. Wade will impact Black women. And this is going to be a video for kind of want to understand what I believe are going to be some of the economic implications of this particular decision. And so what happened, let's say Friday, is that it came out that the Supreme Court said you no longer have a constitutional right to have abortion procedures. We were kind of aware that this was probably going to be coming because a brief came out, I want to say maybe 30, 60 days ago, maybe 90 days ago, in which there was kind of a heads up that the actual court was going to go in this direction. And I think that should have given a lot of people an understanding of where we were going, because normally that type of stuff doesn't release unless people are trying to kind of get people up to speed. However, we're now currently at the situation. So what we're saying is that now things are going to follow to the state level, because the Supreme Court no longer says that you have a constitutional right, because in my understanding, and I'm not an attorney or a counselor by any stretch of the imagination, is federal law kind of is the floor and state law kind of sits above that. And so what federal law kind of says is that you have a constitutionally protected obligation or right to engage in something, and then the states can't interfere with it, right? However, you can have something that can be available to you on the state level, but it not be protected on the federal level, kind of like how marijuana laws look. So this is the reality. You have a lot of states that wanted to get rid of women's access to certain procedures from a reproductive standpoint. So now, because it's no longer federally protected, right, states now can dictate what direction it goes into. What we're going to kind of talk about is the economic issues behind that, because I've been talking about this for a while. And when I first posted about this particular situation on my community page, I had people react to it and tell me, because I'm a man, I don't understand it, yada, yada, yada. But what I understood was this is an economic issue. And I'm going to kind of go into why I believe it's an economic issue. But if you've been following this channel over the past 365 days, you would understand why this is an issue of economics. Now, everybody frames things based on how they look at it, how they, the prism in which they look through the world. Because I really believe that everything in this particular society boils down to economics and resources and resource control, I therefore see everything from that perspective, right? So this is not the channel in which we're going to discuss morality, because that's subjective. We're going to discuss, birth rates and things of that nature, because that's based on evolutionary biology, which most people don't have a background in. In which we're going to discuss, these Latin terms that are supposed to represent the New World Order, yada, yada, yada. Y'all do that over there where that's what y'all do. And y'all build based on that, right? What we're not going to do is have these particular discussions. So voyage travel, behind that, I got to get you up out of here. So I'm going to really repeat myself. This is a discussion based on economics. If you can't have that discussion, you're just in the wrong place. There's a million platforms, right, in which you can discuss all those other things that got nothing to do with the economic data. So I want to really encourage you, before you go down the wrong road, to keep it around the economic data. And then you can go on other platforms and you can discuss all the ancillary things that have never made you $3. Because one of the biggest challenges we have is that we're experts in everything except economic data. And that's why we're at the bottom of every economic scale. We're experts in everything else. We got the most knowledge on everything in the world except the economic data. That's what we're experts on. There's a guy on YouTube was telling a bunch of guys who said they knew all the secrets, and he said it, and he was 100% correct. Y'all know every secret except the secret of how to make money. Y'all got every secret. Y'all got the secret that Jay-Z's in the Illuminati. You got the secret of yada, yada, yada. You got the secret that happened 5,000 years ago. You know about the secret societies, the Bilderberg Group, but you know every secret except how to make money. And so that's what you got to understand. So if you're not here to talk about the actual economic issues, you're in the wrong place, right? Because we're experts on everything except how to become economically self-sufficient, how to move up the economic food chain, how to become economically strong. And if you notice, right, other groups are not as stressed about that because they got the economic situation in place. And that's what we're going to talk about. So how Roe v. Wade will impact Black women is economically. In my perception of this issue, this is an issue to box poor people into another smaller box. Because if you really understand this particular situation, especially if you have people in your family that are old enough, right? People of a certain economic status have always been able to get certain procedures. They've always been able to get them. They've never been without access to these type of procedures, right? Therefore, when these procedures were forbidden on a federal level, right, they still got access to them because of the economic situation that their family in, and those economics, they bring in access, they bring in better relationships. So it really comes down to, you can go to a private doctor, and the way in which they do paperwork, you can get the procedure done because the paperwork will state something different than what actually took place. Now, the average person don't even know what a private doctor is. Why? Because you don't have the economic wherewithal to get you a private doctor, right? Michael Jackson had a private doctor. That's why people saying that he was broke. I said the man couldn't have been broke because he had a private doctor, and I knew how much he was paying that man per month to work for him. And that's the same dude that ended up killing him, but he had the economic wherewithal to get a private doctor. Therefore, these services have always been available to people. So our governor, well, he's not our governor, but the governor of the state of Florida, because I don't live in Florida right now currently, but I am a Floridian, Florida native. He now has created initiatives against this. But if you have the money, you'll be able to go to Miami and you'll be able to get access to these services. Why? Because Miami, right, is a city where if you have the money, you get the access. Right? With everything going into Miami, there's no way in the world they're going to make it to where you can't get access to these services if you have the money. Now, you may have issues in Jacksonville, you may have issues in Orlando, but if you have the money, you'll be able to get access to those services. And D. Graham, what I want to ask you, because you probably came in late, and I don't want to keep repeating myself, if we're not going to talk about the economic issues and how it ties into from an economic standpoint, this is the wrong conversation for you. And I'm going to keep repeating myself. One of the things that we have a problem with is we are experts on everything else except economic issues. We know everything in the world except how to make some more money. We know everything in the world except how to build economic models and how things are going to impact us economically. We're experts in everything else under the sun, right? So that's our issue. So this is going to be an issue for people that are lower on the economic scale, because let's say this is the reality. The reality is these services are not going to be offered in your local area. Therefore, you have to travel, right? You now got to travel to get access to these services. How many people cannot afford to travel? And we know how many people can't afford to travel because we sat back and saw that during that New Orleans hurricane, how many people got stuck in the city? Why? Because they couldn't leave. We saw during the Houston hurricanes, how many people got stuck in the city? Why? Because they couldn't leave. Therefore, those same amount of people are not going to have the ability, right, to move and be mobile. Because if you have the money and you live in the Southeast and these services are offered on the West Coast in California, well, you just pay the money, you go to California, you get the services, you come back. But many people can't afford that because of their economic situation. So once again, what have I been talking about on this channel, right, since we pretty much 2020? Improving your economic situation. Why? Because you don't never know what's going to come up. And the way in which they engage against poor people in this society is they keep boxing them in with the cost of living in this society. You can get the services if you can travel. There will be states in this society where you can get these services, but you're going to have to travel. Therefore, if you can't afford to travel because your economics are not important, because everything else is important to you except your economic situation, right? You got all the theories in the world except the theory of how to go make some more money, or how to improve your economic situation, or how to build an economic group so you and your group can go make some money. You got every theory in the world except that. You got all the relationship stuff fixed out. You understand human nature. You understand female nature. You understand what's wrong with the black man and the black woman. You understand what's wrong with white people. You understand everything else except that. So as they continue to exact these barriers against poor people, you now find yourself to be further and further boxed in. And that's who this is going to impact. Because if you have the financial wherewithal, this is not a big deal. You just go to where you can get the services. Hell, if you got to go to Canada, you get it. You still get it. We have women right now that are leaving to go to other countries to get BBLs. Why? Because they can afford it. We got other women in hotel rooms in Miami, right? Getting, I forgot what you call it, caulk put in their butt. Because why? Because they can't afford to go to the Dominican Republic and get services. So they end up with caulk in their butt. So it comes back to the economic situation. They're just putting a barrier around women that already are economically marginalized. Then they may have barriers in their state and they already were not mobile. I travel a lot, but I've known people that have never left the city of Orlando, right? I've known people that have never left the state of Florida. I've known people that have never left the Southeast. That's the same no matter what part of the country you go to. Some people have never left their immediate area because they don't have the financial wherewithal. So therefore, if these services are not available to them, they can't get access. So what's interesting is that we don't see the economic, we see everything else. Like I said, we're experts on everything except the economic situation, which is exactly why we're where we're at, which is exactly why they can exact more barriers against us. And all we can do is react. Did we pontificate? I was on a live stream last night and the dude's talking about, well, we're incentivizing people to have children. So this is not going to incentivize the behavior. I said, well, what is incentivizing people to not engage in the behavior? He hasn't thought it that through because this is a guy that made all his money doing one thing based on what other people do. And then he just was eating off of that. Right? We don't have the ability to have the conversations around what the real issues are because we never made these things important. So when I did that video, I want to say maybe 6 months ago now, but I talked about how Black women are taking on a lot of debt to get formalized educations, and that debt is choking them out because they got to service that debt over the rest of their life. I had a bunch of Black women that didn't like that, right? So my question to those same people is, what is your solution to this problem? Because we got a lot of people, we know 40% of the people that got student debt didn't even finish school, but they still carrying the debt. That debt now has to be serviced. I'm going to bring you the BLS statistics of how much the median income of our people, right, to understand the economic situation. I'm going to bring you some more data to understand the economic situation on the state by state level. This is why these things are important. So that's what I try to get people to understand. When you don't want to have these kind of conversations and you don't want to make these things important, they know that about you, right? They know you better than you know yourself because they educated you to do the things that you're currently doing right now today. You are a byproduct of their education system. They're not a byproduct of your education system. So they already know what they have put inside your head and how you're going to function. So the issue is that when we don't make these things important, they're able to enact these barriers against you. And then you can't function outside of that barrier. Why? Because I don't have the economic ability to do it. Right? So then now what's going to happen is you're going to be convinced by politicians that they're going to say they're going to change this for you. That's not a narrative. So now both these political groups got red meat that they can feed their audience, right? That they can feed to their audience to get them to rally behind them. This is what you have to understand. And we're going to get away from the economics for 1 second. If a particular political party wanted to make this the law of the land, they could have done it 20 years ago. They chose not to. That's why we're here where we're at right now today. Right? But none of this was important. 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Trump, none of it was important. This is an economic issue. This is not an issue of choice because people that have the money are going to have the access. So we know it's not an issue of choice. This is an economic issue. 8 years of Obama, 4 years of Trump, this was not an issue. What was the issue? I'm going to be the super social justice warrior. This isn't about social justice. This is about economics, right? I got 5 different identities. That's important. Let's change the words now so you're no longer a heterosexual man. You're now a cisgender, whatever man. And if you don't agree with that, something's wrong with you. The Black man is the white supremacist of the Black community. That was so now you at this point, right, to where now they changed the game. They changed the rules of the game in the game. You now got to operate under those new rules, and you feel like the rug has been pulled out on you because, like what I said before, everything is more important than your economic situation. This is an economic issue. It's not an issue of access. It's not an issue of women's choice. Because if you have the money, you're going to have the choices. Because that's always how this situation has worked. Women that come from the right background, and I mean right from an economic standpoint, that have the relationships and have the access, have always had these choices. It didn't matter what the law stated. They've always had these choices, right? It's the women that didn't come from those backgrounds that didn't get access to these choices. So the choices or the options to do this comes from the economic wherewithal of your family and your group. Because if they really hammer down on this, like I told before, you may have to send a girl to Canada. We may have to send a girl to Central South America. We may have to send a girl to Europe. If you're in Africa and you need a major medical procedure, do you know the rich and elite of Africa? Do you know they go to the UK? Some of them go to India because medical services in that continent are an economic issue. So we haven't really been understanding that these medical services that we have access to are really economic issues because we bought into everything else except that. So then now we have a crisis. So now we're supposed to believe that some good white people in DC are going to now finally change this situation. That's who's going to change it, right? That's what people got to understand. And so now we're going to go into the data because I pretty much given my monologue for 15, 16 minutes, but I've been telling you the same thing consistently the same time. Let me explain something to you. I know where they're taking this country. I don't want to tell you because you're not ready for that type of information, right? I know where they're I've been telling people this over a decade. I was in Tampa telling people this is what they're going to do to the American worker. I know where they're going with this country. And so you got to really understand where this thing is going and put yourself in a position economically to be able to deal with it. It's not about another person. It's not about black men or black women. I know a lot of black women that are not concerned with their economic situation. They need to stop lying to themselves. I know them personally. That's why I don't deal with them no more because they didn't want nothing better for themselves. Right? This country makes it real easy to be average. They're making it much harder now to be average. But for literally for 30, 40 years, this country made it real easy to be average. You could be a C player in this country and have stuff. Other parts of the world, you got to be an A player to have what a C player in America has. You could be a C player in America and have an apartment, a car, a house, have a job, money in the bank. You go to other parts of the world, you got to be an A player to get that. You could be a C player in America and get that. They're getting rid of all of that. To be able to survive in this new economy, you're going to have to be an A player at whatever you do. Else you're just not going to have nothing, right? And you're just going to struggle all the time. And it's not about another person. It's about you. Are you an A player at what you do? And does what you do allow you to live a certain lifestyle? It's not about another person. And that's what people got to understand. And so that's what I'm trying to get you to realize. This is an economic issue. And we're going to go into the data. So this is going to disproportionately impact Black women who are disproportionately poorer than other women inside our society, right? They have some of the lowest pay rates. They make the least amount of money on a weekly, bi-weekly basis. They have the lowest net worth. If they're single with a child, they have a negative net worth in many situations. We've gone through all the data over and over and over and over and over again. You can get as mad as me as you want. The data still is the data. You should get so mad at me, you should say, you know what? I'm going to prove David wrong. I'm going to go out here in this particular economy and make myself a success. Make me look like an asshole. You don't want to do that. You just want to argue with me on social media. That's not going to help you. Right? You got to understand, some of y'all need to travel internationally and see how people live in the West Indies. Go to Central and South America, see how people live. And understand that people that don't have nothing, they get nothing. They don't get any services. Nobody's coming to save them. Right? That's why you can go to Brazil and a good population of the girls is prostituting because they ain't got nothing. But in America, we're inside this bubble and we've been in this bubble for so long, we don't realize the real situation of the world, but it's coming. You're getting ready to see it because they're going to continue to raise these barriers. And the way, if you can't pay your way for certain stuff, you just don't get access to it. There's no way in the world this is going to stop people from having sex. If people would stop having sex, we wouldn't have billions of people on the planet. People are going to have sex and they're going to have children. Nobody's going to stop that. So this is not this way in which we're going to control birth or we're going to people are not going to stop having sex. It's just not going to happen. So this is an economic issue to limit the economic mobility and the limit to movement of people that don't have the economic wherewithal to move around the way they want to. That's really all it's coming down to. And then now they're going to be dependent upon another group of people that are going to save them But if they was going to save you, you never would have been in a situation in the first place, because they could have already came in and saved you. Right? They could have saved you 20 years ago, but they waited until this happened, so that now they got something to motivate you to back up whatever they claim they're going to do for you. So let's get into the data, because I've been talking for 20 minutes. We're going to get into it. We're going to get up on out of here, because I got to talk about used cars in a minute. Okay, so here's this particular article. Real quickly, Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade, ending right to abortion. Upheld. Let me zoom this in real quick. Ending right to abortion upheld for decades. Like we said, they bounced it back to the state, right? So you had a constitution. It was constitutionally protected, I guess. That's what the law of the land was. They said that's over, so that was going to fall back to a state level. Like I said, people in the state that have the access, that have the ability to move around, will have the ability, because they can say, well, you know what? The state can say there's only one city in the state in which you can get these services. What if you live on the other side of the state? How you get over there? And you don't have a car, you don't have any money, you don't have access to transportation. How do you get there? You can't. You just stuck, right? We got states in the Southeast, man, where the poverty rate amongst people is so high, it's ridiculous. How they're not mobile people. A lot of people are not mobile. So then how do they get to these particular areas to get these services if the state only allows them in one part of the state? Bureau of Labor Statistics data, right? Go ahead and look at the table. Women, Black, African American, all origins 25 to 55 years old. So that's going to cover women that can reproduce from a biological standpoint based on their age group. All educational levels, wage and salary words excluded, incorporated, self-employed, employed full-time. We got 2022, 866, right? Weekly earnings data, 866. Multiply that, that's around $45,000 a year, right? That's around $45,000 a year. So now the narrative on YouTube is that the Black woman is the most educated. She's making all this money. It don't show up in the data. Do we have outliers? Yes. It don't show up in the median data. Shows up in the median data that Black women between these age groups makes around $45,000 a year. That's not the lowest, it's not the highest, it's the median. That's what the data tells us. So we got to understand is that we're not dealing with a group of people that have a high income. Then we don't even want to go into the wealth statistics, because I don't have time to go through all that. But we've done that on other videos, right? Then we're dealing with primarily a group that has no wealth, because if they had the wealth, this wouldn't be an issue, right? If the Chinese have this type of issue, they got people already on deck that can solve this problem for them, right? If the Clintons have an issue or the Bushes have this issue, they got people already on deck that can solve this problem for them, right? This is an issue. This is an economic issue. Let's go into the next data, right? Low wage map, Oxfam. We already gone through this. Working women of color. So they did a study, right? Talking about the minimum wage. Working women of color, percentage earning under $15 an hour. Now, we don't know how to define women of color, but we know Black women are involved in that. Got state level. Florida, 59%. Earning under $15 an hour. Working women of color. So 59% of the working women of color in the state of Florida earn under $15 an hour at 15 or less. Georgia 54, Alabama 64, Mississippi 69, Arkansas 66, Louisiana 64, Texas 60, Oklahoma 65, Kansas 65, New Mexico 62, Carolina's 59, Virginia 51. You can go look this up. So what we have the ability to do now because of that is we can take this map and we can cross-reference it to the map of where we think these services are going to be offered. So if you live in Florida and these services are not offered except under very strict conditions, and the only place that the services might be offered might be in Virginia, then you got to figure out how to travel to Virginia. But we know that based on this particular study, right, that 59% of the working women of color in the state of Florida make $15 or less. So then now, do they have money to get to the state of Virginia to get these services? See why I've been telling you the whole time you need to worry about your economic situation, and all these 3 and 4 hour discussions about everything else except that is not going to help you based on where they're moving this country. Some of y'all need to travel internationally and see what people really don't have. Because I think a lot of us think that America, the whole world is like America. It's not. They've made it very easy in this society to be a C player. They're unraveling all of that. You can't just get a high school diploma, go work in a factory, and think you're going to retire off that anymore. Them days been gone. They're not never coming back. So if you don't make this type of stuff a reality and important to you, you're going to just find yourself in the worst situation. But you don't have to trip, because there's going to be a lot of people with you, right? It's going to be a lot of people hanging out with you in the same scenario. And then you got a bunch of people not claiming, well, we got to try to change this. This is the problem I have. If we want to help these women, what we're going to do is try to figure out how to give them access to these services. What we're not going to do is try to figure out how to improve their economic situation so they can have more economic mobility. We're not going to do that, because we need poor people in this society so the rich people can be rich. What I'm doing, we're not even supposed to do this. Me, Katrina, Urban Homesteader, Lance, Mecca, and Chastity, we can all form a circle and talk to each other and just pull money out of the market, right? And don't even talk to other black people, because that's what everybody else does, right? The way this system is set up is once you figure out how to become successful, you ain't supposed to tell nobody except other people that already figured it out. You're not ever supposed to tell people that haven't figured it out. You're not supposed to. That's not how this system is set up. Once you figure it out, you're supposed to get with other people that's figured it out, and y'all supposed to form a circle or a team, and y'all keep figuring it out, and y'all just leave everybody else behind. You're not supposed to ever talk to people. You're supposed to just give them charity, but you're not even supposed to teach them how to figure it out. That's how the system works. So what you're going to see is that instead of them trying to figure out how to improve the situation for these women economically so they get more access, so they can move around the way they want to move around, what they're going to do is say, well, we're going to give you the services. Well, the reason why you don't have access is because you're broke, you're poor. But they need those women to be poor to keep their position, right? That's what they need to do, because rich people are never going to give you their money. So they cool with, let me give you the services so you can be comfortable staying where you at. All it takes is for you to get access to these services, and then you'll be comfortable again. Okay, let me give you access to those services. Now you're comfortable. Okay, cool. Now we keep building wealth and you stay at the bottom of society, because that's where you're supposed to be, because this system was set up by keeping a group of people at the bottom. Understand how people are telling you the way you're supposed to, we're going to help you stay at the bottom, because we're not going to teach you anything else. We're just going to make you comfortable at the bottom. So we're going to give you, make sure you get access to the service, but you're still at the bottom of the society. Nothing has changed. The way to help them is to get them out of the situation so they can get the mobility, because they may realize, you know what, I don't even want to stay here no more. I want to live in another country, but you can't even afford to move. So that's how they're going to play this. And so, like I said, both these two groups, they got something now to run off of for the midterms, but it's not going to help poor people, because when all this is over, they still going to be poor. Nothing's going to change that, because there's nothing to put them in a position to do better economically. It's just, we going to make sure you get these services. Okay, let's keep going. So that's the data on that. Like I said, you can take that data, overlay that to these particular states, and then understand from a mobility standpoint how that's going to impact black women who make around $45,000 a year, median. So not the lowest, it's not the highest. And in certain states, the majority of them, what we call women of color, which includes black women, make $15 an hour or less. Let's go to the next one, right? So now how are people going to try to deal with this particular situation? So what you're seeing, this is a website called Fast Company, right? Blase blah, the Supreme Court, 13 states have trigger laws that's going to automatically ban abortion. Many of the states will move to restrict further access. Emergency contraception will become even more important, which is 100%. So we got companies that deal with this. They're telling women to stockpile this particular medication for the future. So there's a website called WIS, says that demand for emergency contraception pills has been up by 50% since May, when this report first came out. We started talking about it, and they're preparing for an even greater surge if this particular situation goes south, which it has, right? While many people rush to buy the pill after unprotected sex, Planned Parenthood advises people to buy it before they need it, since it works better the sooner you take it. Some of the biggest issues people have is the cost of buying it. And then some of them live in certain areas where there's a stigma against buying this kind of medication. People are worried about how people are going to look at them. So this particular company has a pill called the morning after pill, costs $38. It's launched a Restart Donation Bank, which aims to provide free morning after pills to women in need. They can either reach out directly to the brand to get it for free with no questions asked through 2 nonprofit partners, which includes one in Texas and another one in Utah. Next article, JP Morgan Chase tells employees that they will pay to travel to states that allow abortion. So JP Morgan told workers they will pay to travel to states that allow legal abortions, according to a memo obtained by CNBC. It's going to be included in their health plan beginning in July. So you got certain employers that are telling people that work for them, if you need access to these services, we will help you travel to these particular states, right? But that's for the women that work for JP Morgan Chase. A lot of women, especially on the lower income scale, don't work for JP Morgan states, right? That's what you got to understand. So that's what I want people to understand. This is an economic issue. We are experts on everything except our economic situation. We can talk for 5 hours on everything else except that. So then when something impacts us economically, we don't have any solutions to that. We still keep talking about everything else we was talking about before. We've produced a group of people, even though they've graduated through college, they've gotten approved, they've gotten certified, they've gotten all that. They can't talk about anything from an economic standpoint. They're incapable, which is a byproduct of their education. And they don't realize that, right? They don't realize they've only been able to solve other people's problems, right? And so this is the issue. So Stephen, and I'm going to give you a little bit of attention. I'm going to ask you to respond back. Whose morality? If it's not an economic issue, whose morals, right? And so I know we on a lag. You have 120 seconds to respond back to me, right? I'm going to give you the attention that you're looking for. So that's all I got to say about it. I'm going to go through the super chats and we're going to get up on out of here because I got to talk about another economic issue, which is how to buy used cars and not get beat over the head. So let me start at the top. So by the time I get to the bottom of Mr. M, you should have responded by then. Ray Gun, man, I appreciate it. GC, what's going on with it? Definitely, right? Definitely. But it's always been, right? It's always been because wealthier people have always had access to these services. It's never not been the case. So people got to get there, but people don't understand that because they don't know that. They seem to think like wealthy and rich people play by the same rules that they tell poor and working class people they got to play by. The world don't work that way. They've had access to whatever services they need to get access to. Why? Because they can pay their way through the door. That's how the game works. I mean, they got to say how they're biased, right? Because the BLS is looking at labor statistics. And my question is, what is the bias? It is a standard deviation of a plus or minus certain percent. But we don't see this in a real world where we have black people, or the narrative on YouTube is that black women, social media, that black women are doing so much economically better than black men. If that's the case, they shouldn't be worried about this. Because if you can pay your way, this is not going to be an issue for you. So they shouldn't be able to rally black women around this issue if they are so economically superior as they try to present themselves on YouTube. Don't work that way. You can't fool me. See, me and the people in my group, we look at too much economic data. We read too much. We study too many marketplace scenarios. So that don't work on us. It work on a lot of other people. That don't work on us. I had a guy today tell me that there was the company's a 9-figure company. I say, well, who gave it the valuation? Right? Who gave it a 9-figure valuation? Appreciate Miss Grady. Appreciate it. Appreciate the support. What's going on, Urban Homesteader? Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, this city I live in now got a 24% poverty rate. So it's just a reality. And I live in a city that is one of the sex trafficking capitals of the country, right? I moved from a city that's another one of the sex trafficking capitals of the country, if not one of the sex trafficking capitals of the world. We have a lot of sex workers that are at or below the poverty rate, that may not demand that the people that they engage in this work with use contraceptives. And then if they get pregnant, now what do? So this, like I said, this is an attack on poor people. But, we got a bunch of, everybody on the internet is gang, and a bunch of certified squares. So they can't even see those type of threads in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like Houston is known for a track in Houston that's not internationally known, but it's nationally known. This is a major sex trafficking city. So we got thousands of people in that industry that are going to be at or below the poverty rate that may not demand that their clientele use contraceptives, that can end up in this situation. And now what are avenues do they have to deal with it if they have put them inside an economic box? Right? But see, you got to know what's going on to even know this type of stuff exists, even though everybody on the internet is a gang member. Let them tell it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell people. They didn't want to hear that. It definitely, but that's how it is in most parts of the world. That's why a lot of immigrants, in my opinion, come over here and they become so successful, because where they was at, there was no security net. There was no safety net at all. So they come over here and it's a lot easier to look good, because America created a society where you could be a C player and have a nice life. You didn't have to be exceptional. You go to South Korea, if you're not really exceptional, you're just not gonna have nothing. That's how they built that society. Most South Koreans come to America because they couldn't make it in South Korea. But nobody don't want to say that. They've created so much of a competitive society over there that if you don't make it over there big, you just get nothing. You just work real hard and make zero money. So that's why they come over here. It's a lot easier to make it. If they have the same mentality here that it takes to be successful in South Korea, they can make a lot of money here. That's why they came over here and they locked up the whole black hair care space, because they just put the same grind on here that they would have been doing in South Korea. But yeah, people don't realize how easy they have made it to be successful in this country. And it's still easier here than a lot of other places, but they're going to make it harder and harder and harder, because they're getting ready to cut the fat out of a lot of situations. Facts. I was reading, looking at something today about Carvana, about how they structured their bond deal. And the average person doesn't even know you can do that type of stuff. It's just amazing, the stuff that we don't get taught, even though we go to school. It's not a secret. They just don't teach it to you. Not a secret. It's on Front Street. They just ain't going to teach it to you. Appreciate it, Erica Williams, Classic Clown, Smartphone Money. Black nurses, black daycare owners, and black government employees only ones with money. 70% of folks in low-key, low-paying situations. I feel you. I feel you. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so yoga, I got to get you up, but you had your run in the sun, yoga. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, this thing flipped on me. So Getty Els, I appreciate it. Your pastor was correct. Money does give you options, especially in this society. Gives you a lot of options, right? And we're seeing now how important mobility is, right? So this is the issue. Black women using abortion as a form of birth control, which is why our population has been reduced by 25 million since 1975. See, so like I said, no understanding of the economic issue. But I'm supposed to argue with this guy. This is why we have issues in this country, because we've been educated to see everything except the economic issue. That's the issue, right? Because we can argue this. We can't argue the economics of it. We can't argue that. So then, because I can't argue that, I go to where I can get an argument at. Want to really encourage people in this new era. You got to leave this stuff alone. Just got to let it go, because you can't. There's no way to determine that you won or lost in these scenarios. So if I say, you know what, next year I'm gonna start a business, and in 3 years I'm gonna get it to 100 grand a year with a 60% margin of profit. I can determine that, right? Next year, over the course of the year, I'm gonna lose 30 pounds, right? And I'm gonna work out 3 times a week. I can track that. I can create a KPI for that. This type of stuff is the distraction, because then now I got to get data to prove this person wrong and yada, yada, yada. Just got to let it go, because it's not going to help you, right? It's just not. I want to really encourage you as we move into 2022, 2023, just leave people like this where they at, right? Because a lot of people have self-selected to be poor in this society. Agree with them and just leave them by yourself. Because let me explain something to you, right? And we're going to start giving interest. The guy that taught me the markets, you know what he told me? He said, teach it to one person and just leave everybody else alone. That was he taught. He said, teach it to one more person who was Mecca, and he said, leave everybody else alone. Because he says those other people will pull you down. He said, you gotta do that. And so that's what I said before. We don't understand how this game is really played, because what the system teaches you, and I'm not saying that from a negative standpoint or judgment. I'm telling you, that's what he told me. He said, teach what you know to one person, leave everybody else alone. And so that's the issue, is we keep having people come to us and talk about everything else except because they can't even see the economic issue, because their education, their training won't allow them to see it, right? So the only way they can get attention and get some communication is to talk about everything except that, because I notice over and over again, when we talk about the economic issue, nobody knows what to talk about, because I don't have any background in that particular area, even though the information is on the internet, you can just read it and study it. So that's the problem. So I really want to encourage everybody, Black woman, Black man, Black child, whatever, white person even, Asian, Mexican, as we move further and further into the future, if people don't want to make the economic situation important, leave them alone. You might like them. Don't mean you got to disrespect them. Just leave them alone. Because these scenarios are going to become more and more important. They talking about food shortages. They talking about energy costs going up. You got people with gas is at an all-time high. They can't move around to where they need to go to, right? And I'm supposed to argue with somebody on the internet about abortion being a form of birth control. And we got how many billion Black people on the planet? See what I'm saying? So I want to really encourage you to let this stuff, just let these people have it. Let it say, you know what, you right, you won the argument, and go get back to the money. Just get back to the money, right? Just get back to the money. Get back to the real estate, get back to the cryptocurrency, get back to whatever business you got, and focus on that, man. Leave these people alone. Definitely. They don't need to hook up. They can pay. Knowledge, I appreciate it. So this is the issue. America has foreign policy that kills thousands of children every year. And I asked you about the morality. Whose morals? You didn't answer that question. So I'm gonna have to let you go, man. But you know what? There's a million people on YouTube that you can argue with. Definitely. But we won't say whose morals, because let me explain something to people. The spirit of evil has morals. There's certain things the spirit of evil won't do. So when they say morals, when you ask whose morals, they can't tell you, because the spirit of evil has morals. There's certain things the spirit of evil won't do. Why? Because it's against the moral structure of the spirit of evil. So that's why when you ask them, well, this goes against morality, whose morals are you talking about? Well, this goes against, we going back to traditions. Whose traditions? But they just want the argument. I'm past that. They can do that by themselves. They just want the argument. So do I think states will feel the economic pain if individuals start giving up children that they don't want? Okay, so Mr. Shavers, I would ask, are they already doing that? Because then that would be coming from the standpoint that they're not already doing that. So then my question is, what is the adoption? I don't know what you want to call that particular term. Well, how many people get sent for adoption yearly. So what those numbers already exist. So let's say for the state of Florida, how many children on a yearly basis give up for adoption? Then we will have to track, once we start this particular process or start these new initiatives, do we see that number start to move up? Right? So because I don't currently know what the number of adoptions are now, how many children get put up for adoption currently, I don't know if they would start to feel the economic pain, because I don't know how many people are currently doing it right now. Right? And I don't know if I believe there's a correlation between denying these particular services and people giving the children up for adoption. Right? So I would have to get all that data before I start coming up with some assumptions. But that's a good question. Yeah, definitely. Especially Atlanta. Atlanta is an international child sex trafficking place. Like, it's on a whole nother level, something that people don't talk about. Atlanta is on a whole nother level with sex trafficking. It's just, I mean, it's something that's not talked about. Houston is also big because we're so close to the border. But Atlanta gets a lot of people that get flown in on planes. That's how crazy it is, right? Because of the international airport in Atlanta. So it's on a whole nother level in the A. It's on a whole nother level here because of how close we are to the border. So we got a lot of women that's engaged in this particular lifestyle. And now this is something that we're going to have to manage, right? But, you know, they're not worried about that. Yeah, so I looked at Teva. They no longer produce. So yesterday I spent a lot of time looking at companies that make women's reproductive products, because as a trader, I see the world that way. And I found out that Teva no longer makes Plan B. They sold that to somebody else, like I want to say maybe almost 10 years ago. So I saw a lot of other companies. My biggest issue is a lot of them was embedded inside larger pharmaceutical firms. And then the ones that were not had really terrible balance sheets. But somebody is going to win this. Some company is going to benefit from this situation because they're going to sell a lot of products. But if we get a lot of startups that are not publicly owned and they figure it out, then they'll be the winner. Because one thing about this particular area is the market is really saturated in this area. And there's not a lot of differentiation outside of price point, right? So I'm wary of investing or buying in a company where they don't have a way of differentiating the product except for price point, because that's a bad differentiator unless you can figure out how to control the market based on pricing, right? So I'm 100% with, but I was looking at that all day yesterday. I spent about 4 hours looking at that yesterday because, like I said, as I'm thinking about the economic impact, I'm not here to argue morality with people. Like, I'm a Buccaneer. You don't want to know my morality because it'll scare you. Yeah, definitely. South Korea is real big on that. If you don't test into a good college and then have the ability to go work for a major corporation, you're just not going to make a lot of money in that society. So we don't know that so many South Koreans come here because they were not successful in South Korea. South Korea is where we're going to in America. It's just corporatism on a whole nother level, right? That's how they decided to build that particular economy. It's corporatism on a whole nother level. So if you can't become successful in the corporate space, you really don't matter. And they have some of the highest percentage of seniors working menial jobs, right? They have a lot of people plus 65 in South Korea working menial jobs because the jobs they had didn't create the ability for them to retire. So they're just going to work until they die. Well, that's where we're going in America. That's why I'm not arguing with these people over this stuff, right? I'm just not going to do it. They can go ahead. They can win every argument about everything else except the economic situation and the health situation. Outside of that, y'all can have it. Do the 3-hour live streams, y'all got it. Yeah, definitely. But Geechee Dan, what we don't talk about is the American middle class, but especially the white American middle class, was a byproduct of government policy. We've created a narrative that middle class was because they just went to school and worked real hard. That was a result of government policy. So once they got rid of the government policy, it makes it difficult now for people to get there. But it was a result of government policy. And it was government policy that was not allowed to black folks, right? That's another thing we don't talk about, because I have three grandparents, 2 on my mother's side, 1 on my dad's side. They were all veterans of World War II, but neither one of them was allowed access to any of the entitlements from the GI Bill. Well, when white veterans came over here, they got everything laid out as a result of the GI Bill, which helped build that white middle class, right? So this is the actual economic data, but we can't talk about that. We just gonna argue over the fact that black people have a bad wealth position because they got bad morals. What we don't talk about is that millions of white men got entitlements from taxpayers via the American government to improve their situation economically that allowed them to build a middle class. It was government policy, right? So America's going back to its European roots, modern day serfdom. Yeah, I feel you. I believe that. I 100% agree on that. Yeah, he gone now though. So he had a short run. You know what I'm saying? He had a real short run. So he was a bad infantryman because he exposed himself too fast. So it flipped again. Okay, so Tara Blake, I got to get you out of here too, but you got a big audience of people where y'all can have that conversation. So TD Bryant, keep preaching. Appreciate the $20. And you look like you're having fun out there on the slopes, man. Be safe with that. I look at options on Vail, the company that owns the ski resorts. Looking for them to rebound once the pandemic is 100% over. Well, appreciate the super chat. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. But you got to want to get paid. So if you're not trying to get paid, then all business is available. Okay, so Tori, but here's what I would ask you. If you understand how people made money in this country for hundreds of years, if morality was the foundation and it was a determinant of economic success, which morality is subjective, how were people able to make money in this country for so long, which gave them an advantage over everybody else? So one of the things I teach in my dark persuasion situation is one of the reasons why people can't improve their situation or their family is because they have the morals of people that have never been successful in this society. I'm not saying that you got to be a cutthroat. I'm not saying that you got to lie, steal, kill, but what we have programmed ourselves is that somebody else's morality, because it's not our morals, right? It's not our morals. It's somebody else's morals that they told us to play by are going to give us an advantage in this society when it hasn't worked. They're playing a different game. And it's the morality that has allowed them to become successful in this particular society. And then we're just supposed to sit back and say, well, you know what? I got better morals. Now, if you just want to be exempt and you don't want to play the game, cool, right? But I don't buy into that. I just don't buy into it because I know what kind of people I'm dealing with. And morality is subjective, right? It's very much subjective. We're talking about a country that kills thousands of children every year, right? They just do. And most people either don't know it or it violates their cognitive dissonance, so they can't accept it. But it got nothing to do with women's reproductive services. The United States of America kills thousands of children every year. And part of the death of those thousands of children is the reason why we got the country we got right now today. So if we want to talk about a moral issue, my thing is whose morals, right? And I can't get anybody to jump on this thing and actually have a conversation. They just want to type at me. There's Twitter fingers. But if you ever want to have a conversation, or you can find a member of your group to have a conversation about how morality and economics are intertwined, let me know. And I'll be more than willing, and I'll be respectful. I won't be disrespectful, and I'll allow you to say your piece. But I'm going to really ask you to explain the connection between your moral set and your economic ability of you and your group, and how there's a direct correlation and how that makes you and your group competitive against other groups that have different morality. Right? So let me know. It's an open invitation. It don't have to be you. It could be a member of your group. But we're going to talk about morality and economics. We're not going to talk about anything else. Let me know. I'm open to it. Definitely. See, people don't know about that because the narrative is that, oh, they're just successful because they work real hard. they don't understand is that they came over here because they couldn't make it in South Korea because it was too competitive. Because South Korea pretty much now has a winner take all environment. Either you win and get it all, or you lose and get nothing. And then it creates impacts all throughout your family. They don't have any kind of like social safety nets that we have over here in America. They're not playing that game. You know, either you show yourself qualified to work in certain areas, or you just go work a menial job and you get nothing. That's why you got people in South Korea living in closets and they paying money for that. That's coming to America too, though. I have a book. It's on Amazon called Why the Black Sheep Wins. And you can get the ebook for like $2. So I got a book. So that's going to be it, man. I got to get on this next live stream to do this used car game. Appreciate everybody coming out. Appreciate everybody supporting. Appreciate the conversation. And like I said, if you ever, right, want to talk about economics and morality and all those type of stuff, let me know. I'm more than willing to give you a platform, and you can say what you want to say, but it got to be along those particular lines, right? You can't just start talking, you know, about who won the game last night. And I'll be more than willing to give you a platform to say what you got to say, and then we'll have a conversation about it. David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. I'll talk to you later.